Hello, everybody. First, I'd like to ask our president, Professor Mainzer, to say a few words. Klaus, you always make such a nice introduction, so please,
Yeah,
the
thank you,
podium is yours.
Dušan. First of all, greetings from Salzburg. This evening I'm in Salzburg, and some of you already were connected the whole day in the Presidium meeting in the morning and then in the afternoon the Senate. And now this wonderful, and that is the highlight for me of this day, namely our meetings here in this wonderful lecture series. First of all, I would to welcome you to the new year with all good wishes for 2025. And the Dean of Arts, Violeta Dinescu, and the Dean of Medicine, Dušan Šuput, have once again put together an inspiring program for the first Arts Meets Science event this evening. To summarize, tonight will be intercultural. The first lecture is about a so-called microtonal sound system, which is not only found in almost all cultures, but also in nature. Acoustically, this refers to sounds that are less than a semitone apart. If you pay attention to the soundscape in nature and everyday life, you will hear precisely these microtonal tones, which are also expressed in different ways in different cultures. Microtonal music theory, and that is a subject of our first speaker's doctorate under Violeta Dinescu, has analyzed this variety of tones historically and systematically. In the Western tradition, approaches to microtonal music can be found from ancient Greek tonal signs to Gregorian chants in the Middle Ages and Renaissance music. Many compositions in the 20th and 21st centuries use microtones, presumably also under the influence nowadays of globalization in the communication and confrontation with non-Western cultures. Why the classical tonal system of Western music divides the octave with a frequency ratio of 2:1 to the basis into 12 semitones. Indian music theory, for example, uses 22 microtones per octave. Mood in Indian, Indonesian, Arabic, and Persian music simply cannot be represented in Western semitones. Microtonal variations of intervals are also standard practice in the African American music of spirituals, blues, and jazz. I find the perspective of microtonal music theory fascinating because it combines natural acoustics from nature with different cultures. It thus corresponds to the interdisciplinarity and interculturality that characterizes not only this lecture series, but also our European Academy. The second lecture is also dedicated to a cultural historical topic. It is about the cultural historical origin of religious interpretations of diseases and epidemics. Here too, we are dealing with a cross-cultural phenomenon. However, we should by no means believe that these interpretations have been overcome by Enlightenment, philosophy, science, and medicine. These interpretations live on as conspiracy theories even in modern secularized societies. But there are also serious scientific studies on how religious beliefs can influence disease findings. Here too, an interdisciplinary perspective is required. All in all, we can look, I think, forward to another stimulating evening that brings together the various classes of our academy. I thank you for your attention.
So, I also going to present shortly now RAMI CHAHIN, a composer, Syrian-German, theorist and musicologist. He had very complex studies, and the most important discovery I could say he did is that to put the traditional essence element of his country, the Assyrian tradition, is a melodical one, and he succeeded in introducing a new dimension in his microtonal melodical tradition together to the Western musical tradition, and he contributed with a global appreciation and understanding of diverse musical cultures. Please, Rami, you have your floor.
Okay, but you can see my presentation, yeah? Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, we can see. We can see.
Yes, fine.
Okay, everything fine. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Actually, I had the honor to be supervised by Professor Violeta Dinescu, first of all. And the most important thing she gave me, in addition to the advices, also the freedom to do my research. For me, this theme was very important, or still very important. Actually, I had a lot of issues in Syria when I was in Syria, because Arabic music, we knew that it can be harmonical music, because it's melodical music. We knew that microtonal music cannot be harmonic. We knew that traditional music should stay like what it is. So today I'm going to give my presentation about microtonal music, classifications, and importances. Oops. Yeah. Okay, I'll start with the agenda. I'm going to make a short introduction, questions to be answered, history of tuning, definition and terminologies, classification of microtonal music, concepts in horizontal and vertical microtonal music notation, importances of microtonal music, and I'm going to the conclusion at the end. The introduction, microtonal music, we can find it in all over the world. So it is especially in the music of the world. Microtonal has special classification. This is what I found, and this is what I'm going to talk about. The main questions here, where should the microtonal be precise? I mean, where I should use the microtonal as if it is 100% correct, or it is 100% correct, or not. Where the temper of the sound is important in a music, and how can new theories influenced by traditional music and nature without deforming the origin, which means I'm keeping the origin, but I'm doing something new. What are the benefits of microtonal music? Perhaps one of the first tuning systems in the world was found here in Germany for 35,000 years, which is a bone and with holes, which means it's something like a flute. And this is the first, perhaps, tuning system. We can guess that it's perhaps not related to any mathematical or physical issue, but perhaps it's related to a timbre, a sound timbre. After that, we can find instrument and people playing together. For example, 2,500 years in Babylonian, people playing instruments together. And then in Egypt, we have also the harp, similar harp, and it was played at that time. But how was the tuning system at that time? Here we find some practices for princesses who they used to write the music. So music were written. And because of that, should be a method, why they wrote it like that, and how was it? What does it mean? This is one of the, this is the oldest note notation in the world, was found in Ugarit in Syria. And this is the notation, which we find that it was harmonic. So there were two sounds played together. How they tune it, when we go from, for example, here when we see the column 2, for example, the sound going from 2 to 6, 6 going to 3, 3 to 7, 7 to 4, 4 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 2, which means it was something like what we can call it now the Pythagorean theory, more or less. And even in Egypt, they followed the same system of using the disc down or up to find the scale which they used at that time, and which can give us a good idea that they used similar to Pythagorean scale at that time. Of course, it was heptatonic. So this is what it was proved, that there were 7 tones, and how they prove it, it was 7, because, I mean, let me just jump a little bit, sorry, because it was found in, for example, this, it is now a song, and we find that there are 7 tones are used in this music, which is about 2,400 BC. I'm sorry, because I did it. And the reason we find in all of cultures, more or less, this kind of connecting music, as you mentioned before, that it is connected to the divine and health, and also goodness and positive things in the world. And because of that, the tones should be should sound good and also in a harmony. And just a quick look at also Greek time and the notation at that time. And also if we go to Pythagorean and Ptolemaic scales, they were something similar to what they did in Babylonian. But in Dorian, we find something different about and Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. It's different from which are used nowadays. I think the reason because of that, it's because of the science at that time were developed to go to microtonal music and to use it more and more. Just to give a quick definition, just to know what I mean by microtonal music. Microtonal music, I defined it, or also you find it in Grove dictionary. So it's what's different from the logarithm 2. It means when we have a semitone, it's 100, tone 200, and so on till 1200. In this case, the 12 tones will be divided in these 1200. And this, what I call it, mathematical division for the scale. So it has nothing to do, or it's not directly has to do with the rational number. It has to do more with the logarithm, which is a little bit, I'll talk about it later. It's a little bit far from the accurate rational low numbers. Semitones, here I'm using, for example, many mistakes happened to traditional music when they say it's quarter tone. Quarter tone, the definition of quarter tone, any tone between 25th and 74th cent, they will be counted as quarter tone. Otherwise, it's not a quarter tone. It would be a tone and a semitone. So for example, if I have C plus 24 cents, it means it's C. It's still C. From C till C plus 24 cents, it's C. And if it's 25, so I'll count it now like a quarter tone. And 50, of course, 50 is the accurate quarter tone, but it's still till 74, it's still quarter tone. After a quarter tone, it would be a semitone, which is 75, up 75, it would be a semitone. Because of that, I had to divide an interval into 12 tones. So semitone will be divided into 6. I found that it's a little bit more, more accurate, but I'm not going to give musicians a lot of efforts to do, and I won't give them a lot of work. So I decided just to divide the scale in, the notation into, or even the scale to 72 tones, microtones in my work. Now I am talking about my work, which I find it's okay. Even though many musicians cannot play these 72 tones accurately. Why this is important? For example, now we see from Arabic music 3 kind of genus, which are Bayat, Rast, and Siga, and they have all the A, it's microtonal B. But even though when I'm writing it in 24 equal tempered system, they will be the same. We won't find any differences. But if I write it in 72 equal tempered system, in this case, I'll find differences. So because of that, I found it's very important to say that these microtones are different, even in the same culture. So it should be changeable. Even in Persian music, we find also special divisions, which are also related to rational numbers. And also, if we go to, for example, now it's Daska, they give the microtones special notation. And of course, in Sheena, it's still working with the non-microtonal music, although I found many microtonal music also in traditional music in Japan, for example, which is similar a little bit to, or people think that it's similar to Chinese music, and it's still written in 12 equal tempered system. This is that Chinese also. I thought perhaps it would be a good idea just to give a historical background for the microtones. Here, microtones still away from the Chinese culture, because Chinese stayed close to their rational numbers, or what you can call it also similar to Pythagorean way of designing a scale. I don't know if it's possible, or I mean, just to write it, they write it in certain way, the music, so it's not changeable. You can't change it. In Arabic music, we find something different because each microtonal name, each microtonal tone has a special name. So if it's an A and has a name, and if it's a little bit higher than an A, so it has a different name now. It's not the same name. But in Chinese, for example, music, it will still the same. And the divisions, here we see that the rational numbers are still close. I'm sorry for that. In Indian music, we find that they are they went farther than the Chinese music, and they had the raga music and the swara, which is the intervals between the tones sari, gama, batani, which are the scale. And of course, in this case, if we are starting from an C, the scale will be 22 till the next C. It's 22 intervals. But if we start from D, so it would be different microtones. So in this case, we have 22 multiplied by 22 also. Also in gamelan music, we have certain notation which based on the resonance of metal, which is different from what we saw before. Before they depended on the resonance of a string. Here it depends on something in harmonics, which makes the sound. You listen to it and you think it's perfect. I mean, we don't feel like it's wrong because of using metal, and the metal resonance make us accept this kind of notation. And this kind of notation we won't see it in Babylonian, in old Greek time, and also in China, and even in India. So it was special. Even in Arabic music, they used similar method to not from gamelan music, but from Chinese music, or also old Babylonian music, in creating the microtonal scales. For example, here we see maqam Nairuz with divisions. For example, if you see 204, 151, 134, which is all microtones and precise microtones, actually. It's not any microtones. And here comes the question, if microtones are accurate and stable in this case, because this is the theory, and in fact, it's something different. And yeah, so this is the normal scale, but it would be played in each country or in each region differently. Contemporary music, of course, has its own composers, and they develop their tuning system differently. Classification of microtonal music, we find that there is a random way of creating microtonal scales, and or they create tuning system related to the temper of a sound, or they have a scientific background for this microtonal music, or traditional and heritage. We start by the first one, random. If a composer, for example, wish to have a special nature sound, or a special angry sound, so in this case, that note itself, it's not important anymore. I don't care if it's microtone. This microtone is a little bit higher or lower. What's for me important is the sound itself to reflect my feeling. For example, here is my composition. I don't know if you can hear it. Please, if not, you can tell me. Can you hear something?
No, you know, Rami
Okay.
is also very late, but when we shall receive your presentation, we can put it in the internet and you can bring longer examples. Thank you.
So I'm not going now to.
It's a complex score. It's
Okay.
impressive. It's wonderful.
Yeah, just we can see at the end there is no special tones. I don't wish special tone to be played, but just to imitate special sounds. And in this case, I just give a range. You can play any tone in this range, fast or slow, just to give me this kind of impression. And microtones here important in general, but not a certain microtone is important. And related to the temper of a tone, for example, if I'm trying to imitate a special sound, in this case, the temper of the sound, for example, in the Tibet singing, where the sound itself is important, it's the overtones are very important for me more than anything else. So for example, if I'm giving just one tone, like it's the same tone, but I'm singing it in different way. And in this case, it's also a kind of changing the microtones in the string and the way of presenting the microtones in temper. And here we see the overtones, which is in harmonic way. This is what we were talking about. China, Babylonian, and other. They used something similar to this overtone scale, or yeah, exactly. And of course, it came from the vibration from the fundamental tone and the reflect of the air around it. In sciences, it's not any more important what kind of, I mean, what's important is the mathematical issue. So I'm composing for certain scale, which is 100 cents, for example, and then 120 cents. And then I'll give some examples, for example, now, tuning system based on arithmetic calculation. For example, I divided here the cello depending on logarithm 3. And in these divisions, I found a scale which is composed from 81 tones. So from C1 to C2, an octave, we have 81 tones. It's 9 multiplied with 9. And there is, in this case, there is a mathematical background for my presentation, for my piece, for my work. It's not anymore the beauty of the intervals, the beauty of the harmonies. No, it's just the mathematic. And of course, this is the calculation. You can find it here. And here you find a lot of microtonal music should be precise because it represents the mathematical numbers. So it should be correct. 100% should be correct to be presented in front of people. And here the feeling of the composer is very important to show these tones, because it's written by, let's say, by a computer, and now the work of the musician is to play these tones precisely. And here a second piece where, for example, I'm adding about 120. So it's not precise. It's not has nothing to do with rational number, but it has to do with cents. And these cents should be more and or less with certain number. For tuning based on the temper of the sound, here the physics of the sound is important, like the gamelan music. In a way, it's an inharmonic, and the harmonic one when we are playing, for example, two instruments, and the harmony of the sound is very important. So in this case, what I did is I tried to make scales depending on the overtones. So I call them the microtonal overtone scale. And from this microtonal overtone scale, I try to find, for example, Arabic music, Indian music, other art, kind of from other cultures of music. But in this case, I'm not going to play the same pieces which are played in their countries. I'm trying to compose something new, not to deform the origin. I'm not going to hit the culture. Tuning system based on both high and low numerator in rational number, of course. We are talking about rational number, non-zero denominator. And in this case, we have traditional, and we talked here about before how to make a rational number high. For example, if I say 240 on 300, so we have high rational numbers in numerator and in denominator. Yeah, and for example, also in Pythagoras, when we have at the end, we have an C and F where the sound don't fit exactly very well. So in this case, we have this kind of high numerator and denominator in rational. Traditional and heritage. For example, if I'm taking music from my grandpa and I'm not asking him about the tuning system he is playing, so I'm just taking the tuning system from somebody else, not depending on mathematics or physics. I am just inheriting that from somebody else. I am living in a village in India and people there playing this tuning system. I'm inheriting this tuning system. And this is what can make the music in India, for example, different from place to another place or in the Arab world. Yeah, here there's some music, so we will skip it also. The main concepts, it's in horizontal. So this is what I did in my doctoral degree, a new theory, new ideas, how to make new microtonal music, and to use this combination of classification together. For example, here you can find my work in Barada, where it's mixed between Arabic music, contemporary music, and the tuning system. It's a traditional Arabic tuning system, but it's based on spectral issue. So we have harmony, sounds, harmonic, inharmonic, and polyphonic, and counterpoint microtonal music, multi-tuning system. Of course, polyphonic counterpoint could be in one issue very fast. So it's, for example, here, you find just here maqam, Arabic music in a harmony. It was for me very important to do something like that in my doctoral degree, to prove that you can do something beautiful using microtonal music in harmony. So, and this work also with orchestra. So, okay, I'll skip it because the music will be played. The second issue is to work on the overtone of the scale, not just the maqam itself, but even the overtone of the scale, and to find certain harmonies, and to find where can be the string of the overtone. For example, the overtone, we find that the fundamental tone, theoretically, and now I am talking just theoretically, it can be something different, of course. Theoretically is like number one, who's giving the sound its character. And for me, I'm writing scales depending on the overtone, using, for example, the fundamental tone and, for example, the 14th interval, or the 14th overtone, or the 7th overtone, but not more than 16th overtone, because I find that the sound theoretically can be less in string than, of course, I repeat it again, in, for example, in clarinet or in violin, the higher overtones is very strong also. But I'm taking it theoretically.
Excuse me, Rami.
Yeah. I'm looking at
Please.
my watch. Yeah, okay. I'm going to finish in this case. Multisystem is to use all of that microtone scales, which is based on mathematics and overtones. And I think, okay, at the end or before the end, where can we use microtone? Microtone is very important. It's like the colors. Instead, we just 12 colors that we have. We are using now hundreds of colors. So because of that, microtones are very important to show all of these variety of colors. In music theory, of course, contemporary music, education, because many countries don't have the European system, so they need their own cultural system, which based on microtones, and to define cultures also, which is the character, gives the character of the of a certain culture. In music therapy, it's very important because waves and the brain, it works with just with overtones. My body is different from your body, which means perhaps you need different kind of overtones sorry, microtones to represent your body work. At the end, here I gave a short presentation about the past and the future of microtone classifications and how can we develop future music also and use it and how it is important for many fields in music. This is my bibliography, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And we are also very happy to have here Graham Waterhouse, who premiered your PC Sudoku and -1 beautiful one.
Exactly.
We shall discuss at the very end. Thank you so much, Dušan. Now you present, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure to present Professor Tavernier, who's an art historian, and he started research and teaching at Max Planck Institute in Rome, in Italy, and then at universities of Munich and Leipzig, Salzburg, Graz, and Santa Barbara in USA. Then he was appointed to the University of Koblenz-Landau, where he directed the Institute of Aesthetics and Art History of the Koblenz campus until his retirement in 2021. He's still a visiting professor at the University of Alba Iulia in Romania. His main interests have always been communication and didactics of art history and cultural studies. And his research still has an impact on school practice, adult education, and tourism. He's an elected member of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts, and he had a very important function. He was a member of Presidium in the years between 2000 to 2006, and then 2010 and 2014. He published over 170 publications, including the last one, I think, that is coming soon, which would be Volume 1, COVID-19 Cultural Studies, which will be published by Springer Nature. And please, the podium is yours.
So thank you very much for the invitation to speak tonight and for your introduction. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I have no pictures. That means you can close your eyes and only listen. Okay, let's start. When all epidemic becomes the threat of the living world, the challenge is existential. Lore tests that few things feed the notions and powerlessness and dom as much as the emergence of an unknown and rapidly spreading infectious disease, that includes COVID-19. After the pathogen first appeared in late 2019 and then spread rapidly through the world into a state of fear and paralysis, myths and ideas soon began to surround the pandemic, with some even interpreting the notifiable infectious disease as God's punishment. Although modern medicine as a practice-oriented empirical sciences views infectious disease scientifically and free of any religious interpretation, people sought such justification and meaning for the outbreak in the religious patterns of interpretation. These primitive ideas of demonic and divine influence on disease and epidemics can be traced back to the ancient Near East, where demonology had been developed that influenced the imagination of archaic Greece and the emergence of the monotheistic religion in ancient Israel. Since the 5th or 4th century BC, this was countered by the findings of art of healing in classical Greece, the so-called rational ancient medicine from which modern health science developed. Nonetheless, religious interpretations of illness as punishment and retribution persists to these days, and in an archaic religious interpretation, evoke feelings of guilt and fear in the sick. My lecture follows the traces and markers of this development from a cultural historical perspective. The area of observation is the Mediterranean and the Near Eastern cultural regions, which are among the oldest of humanity. The period under consideration extends from the ancient Near Eastern cultures to the end of late antiquity in the 5th, 6th century, and the beginning of the Arab expansion in 7th century. This period is defined, on the one hand, by the transmission of material evidence, pictorial representations, and written sources that can be traced back to the 3rd millennium BC. On the other hand, it is marked by the emergence of the two most recent Abrahamic monotheistic world religions, Christianity and Islam, in whose holy scriptures the idea of illness as a punishment from God no longer has a place. Okay, let's start. Because of the transition from nomadism and sedentarism, which took place in the Neolithic period and was called the Neolithic Revolution, people no longer lived together in hordes and moved around as wandering groups of wild hunters. They began to grow crops, raise animals, and settle in larger communities. One region of origin is the area of the so-called Fertile Crescent, which stretches from the Persian Gulf through Mesopotamia northward to the Anatolian Plate, from there southward along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and according to more recent views, also includes the Nile region. In the fertile area of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, the ancient Oriental cultures developed, in which writing developed earlier than in other regions of the world, along with agriculture. With urbanization, a society based on the division of labor was formed. The sedentary lifestyle and close-knit communities increased the risk of disease transmission. When epidemics and plagues occurred whose causes were not understood, they were explained by the power of unpredictable divine or demonic forces, and often interpreted as punishment for cultic offenses. Because the occurrence of an infectious disease could not be explained because the causes were unknown, but the existential challenge was experienced, ideas of ghostly beings arose that served to make the threat vividly understandable. This was done, on the one hand, through incantations that describe the spirits and their deeds as they were imagined, and, on the other hand, through pictorial representations that vividly reproduced these characterizations. By making the demons of disease conceivable through words or images, they lost their invisibility and mystery. They were apparently recognizable and given a name that banished their power. Healing efforts were characterized by a mixture of healing knowledge and magic against the demons of disease, who were believed to be acting on a divine mandate. In ancient Greece, too, illness was originally seen as a punishment from the gods. The Iliad, attributed to Homer, provides evidence of this. Right at the beginning, we are told that Apollo, son of Zeus and Leto, punished the Achaeans camped outside Troy with a pernicious plague, because Agamemnon, the commander-in-chief of the army, had broken his word to a priest of the Olympian god. Apollo, like his firstborn sister Artemis, was one of the 12 Olympian gods. He was not originally characterized as the gentle god of the fine arts, music, and healing. Originally, he was feared as an angry, punishing, and avenging deity. Apollo brought disaster, death, and corruption. In the imagination of the people of the 8th and 7th century before Christ, the Olympian gods had brought the world out of chaos. They established order. Like the social elite of the time, they ruled over the land and the people. Those who wished to gain the favor of the Olympians could do so through rituals, sacrifices, mysteries, festivals, or games. Those who failed to do so showed no humility or even refused to do so, demonstrating religious sacrilege and hubris, faced the wrath of the gods. The descriptions in the Iliad followed the paradigms from the ancient Oriental cultures, where illness was explained as the punishment of unpredictable divine and demonic forces. Only atonement could purify people and free them from the miasma, that's the Greek word, the stain and contagion of the wrongs they had committed. As can be seen from the report of the ancient historian Thucydides on the so-called Attic plague, the idea of illness as divine punishment was no longer completely uncritically accepted in the 5th century, but it was still present. The epidemic broke out in the summer of 430 BC, when Athens, the capital of Attica, was besieged by the Spartans and the Aelians in the 2nd year of the Peloponnesian War. Since the inhabitants of the surrounding countryside had also fled to the protection of the walls, the resulting overcrowding in the enclosed city and the increasingly poor hygienic conditions in the emergency shelters facilitated the spread of the epidemic. The mortality rate only among the young adults is estimated, as far as possible according to the sources, at about 25%. Soberly and objectively influenced by the sophistry, medicine, and philosophical epistemology of this time, Thucydides notes how people were ready to fall into religious patterns of interpretation in perceiving and explaining the disease, perceiving the plague and its consequences as a divine influence. In monotheism, which gradually grew out of polytheism in various phases and became increasingly strong in ancient Israel, in the first millennium BC, diseases and epidemics were seen as a punishment from Yahweh, the God of Israel. The scriptures of the Hebrew Bible formed the basis of the doctrine of faith. They form a heterogeneous collection of texts that evolved from centuries of oral storytelling into written records. Beginning in the middle of the 8th century before Christ, the traditions were compiled in Hebrew into larger units. The final reduction is dated to the period between 300 BC and 41 in our times. According to the stories in Hebrew Bible, Yahweh was regarded as a commanding God because he led the people of Israel out of Egypt and saved them from slavery. Those who obeyed these commandments had no fear of punishment. Those who disobeyed God's laws, on the other hand, were threatened with sickness, disaster, and corruption. God's punishment was especially severe because it could affect not only the guilty, it also affected their offspring. This meant that each person was responsible for the future of his descendants, born and unborn. The punishment applied to individual suffering as well as to disease suffered by the community, including epidemics. In ancient Israel, disease and epidemics were an expression of punishment for human misbehavior. It was the mark of sinful people who had become guilty for all to see and were being punished for disobeying rules. Infected persons were considered unclean and outside the order created by Yahweh, which excluded them from the fellowship associated with God until they were healed and thus made clean and fit for worship, which again was solely in the power of Yahweh. Since Yahweh had sent the diseases, he was also the only one who could take them back and heal the people at their request. Although the causes of the diseases were not known at that time, it was known from experience that sexuality, skin diseases, and diet, meat from sick or dead animals, could lead to corrupting health problems. It had been observed that the exchange of bodily fluids, blood, semen, saliva, and, in the case of skin diseases, touching sick people, could lead to further infections. These areas were therefore strictly regulated to the extent that the book of Leviticus punished the consumption of blood from all fleshly beings with death. The intended isolation of the sick was therefore not only justified by the fact that these people were considered to be guilty persons outside the fellowship with Yahweh. The measure was probably also based on the practical experience that the infection of other people could be reduced or even avoided by marking and isolating the sick. As long as people saw illness and punishment and retribution for violating the divine order, only the gods could heal the sick. In ancient Oriental cultures, priests, along with the physicians and the magical healer, acted as intermediaries between the wrathful deity and sinful human being. Their role and duty was to consult oracles and perform healing rituals that would free people from the spell. In ancient Israel, however, only Yahweh was considered a healer. The prophets and men of God were the mediators of divine healing power. Only after Yahweh had performed the healing, which the priest had to inspect and confirm, did prescribed purification rituals restore the disturbed cultic and social order. The myths and figurative ideas of divine omnipotence and terrible punishments that had spread over the centuries were criticized and rejected in the 6th and 5th century BC. In Ionia, on the western coast of the Near East, a way of thinking developed that sought to explain and justify the phenomena observed in nature in terms of reason, in contrast to the old views determined by myth and belief in the gods. These physicists, as Aristotle later called natural scientists, looked at the world in a new rational way. They asked about the origin of all things. They searched for cosmic laws, primordial substance, primordial law. The natural philosophers understood the cosmos as a whole, whose origin they saw in water and air. Heraclit recognized in the Logos a lawfulness that pervaded worldly reason or the general sense of reality. With this proposal for a rational understanding of the world order, he argued that the origin and constant change of the cosmos were not determined by the gods, but could be recognized and explained by reason. Divine intervention and punishment had no place. The Ionian natural philosophers rejected religious interpretations of disease. Viewing man as part of the whole, they attributed the processes in the human body to natural causes. Disease and its treatment had become a matter for natural scientists and no longer the concern of temple doctors. Myth and belief in the gods had been replaced by the rational thinking, which in the 5th century BC paved the way from empirical medicine to scientific medicine in antiquity. This was preceded by the development of a democratic form of government in many cities of ancient Greece, which allowed a political order based on the principle of popular sovereignty to replace kingship and, later, the oligarchy of aristocratic families. In terms of urban planning, this was clearly expressed by the fact that the heart of the city was no longer the royal palace, but the agora, the place of public assembly, with the polis, the community of citizens. This new order was based, above all, on an unusual predominance of the spoken word over all other instruments of power. It becomes the political means par excellence, the key to all authority in the state, the instrument for achieving domination and control over others. Power is no longer justified by a formula or a ritual. It is the concept in controversial debate, discussion, argumentation that will determine future thought and action. In the early days of Christianity, the understanding of illness and healing developed in the conflict between the poles of religious interpretations of illness as God's punishment, the laying on of hands and magic, and the findings of scientific and rational ancient medicine. This period stretches from the public appearance of Jesus of Nazareth, who traveled through Galilee as a Jewish preacher, through the writing of the New Testament in the second half of the 1st and the beginning of the 2nd century, to the separation of Christianity and Judaism in the 3rd and the 4th centuries, the so-called parting of the ways. These texts, which often refer to the writings of ancient Judaism in the Hebrew Bible, proclaim Jesus after his death in terms of a majesty as the Christos, sent by God, the Savior of the cosmos, the Messiah, the Son of God, the wisdom, and the Logos. In contrast to the writings of the Hebrew Bible, which portrayed disease and epidemics as God's punishment, Jesus explicitly contradicted the interpretation of physical suffering as a consequence of the sin of the individual or his ancestors. In contrast to the threats in the prescriptions of the Hebrew Bible, the descriptions in the Gospels of the New Testament illustrate in an easily understandable, memorable, and meaningful way, promising and bringing healing, that illness is not to be understood as God's punishment for the sins of individual people or even their ancestors. A connection between illness and sin did not exist at the time of the emergence of Christianity. After Judaism and Christianity, Islam is the youngest and the second largest of the three monotheist world religions, which see Abraham or Ibrahim as their common progenitor. The doctrine of faith emerged in the 17th century and reveals connections and a confrontation with the religious and social-cultural roots of Judaism and Christianity. The Quran is the holy book of the Islam, written in Arabic. It is the defining textual basis of the strictly monotheistic religion and is considered the most important monument of ancient Arab culture. It constitutes the collection of received and publicly proclaimed revelations of God to Muhammad, the prophet and messenger of God, who is also considered the founder of the religious and social movement. The other textual basis and doctrine of norms of Islam is the Hadith. These are the collections of narratives, reports, messages, and traditions related to Muhammad's Sunnah, which are understood to be the customs, actions, and guidelines of the Prophet by which he, as the messenger of God, serve as a model for all Muslims. After Muhammad's death, the Prophet's deeds and sayings were transmitted by his closest companions, first orally and later written form, along with the ideas and thoughts of those who transmitted the Prophet's teachings. The oldest hadiths date back to the 9th century. The texts are placed immediately after the words of the Prophet in the Quran. As the Quran states, God is the creator and human life from birth to death, a time of trial. The catalogues of virtues in which the commandments and transgressions are listed serve as guidance for shaping one's life according to the divine will. Physical suffering is therefore to be understood as an opportunity for the forgiveness of sins. If a person has not conformed to God's order and has sinned, he finds in an illness or injury the opportunity to make amends, to reconcile with God. Since Islam considers God alone as the creator, life on earth is a gift from God. Man is a follower appointed by God, who has been given life and well-being and who will have to give an account on the day of judgment, whether he was recognized the creator as the giver of things and how he was administered these gifts. In Islam, man is called by the plan of creation to seek God. He receives guidance and instructions from God, with whom he can enter into a dialogical relationship. The means of establishing the bond between God and man is the Quran. The Quran offers the believer the basis and the opportunity to shape his life in his relationship with God and to find the path of true faith. This option and the responsibility it entails enables the believer to seek medical treatment and appropriate medical measures in case of illness. This does not negate the believer's trust in God. On the other hand, rituals such as those handed down from polytheistic cultures for healing the sick are rejected. These include sorcery, charms, and divination. As the verses from the Quran and the Hadith show, two basic meanings can be derived for the interpretation and the treatment of illness and disease in Islam. One involves sickness and disease as a test of man by God. The other shows sickness and disease as a sign of God's grace for the forgiveness of sins and reconciliation with God. There is no evidence or justification for the interpretation of sickness and disease as a punishment from God. The results. Unknown infection, disease, and epidemics have always been perceived as serious threats. Infection could mean the destruction of the living world. As long as these misfortunes remained incomprehensible because the cause was unknown, but it was observed how the body was weakened and how the health disorder could spread from the individual to others and endanger the entire community, the explanation was attributed to higher powers. God cults, and religion offered solutions. Locating illness in divine causation made it possible to give the inexplicable suffering and death of people a reason and a meaning that also answered the existential why. Furthermore, in the medicine of the ancient Oriental and ancient Egyptian cultures, the combination of magical rituals and empirical observations to combat and ward off diseases and epidemics can be seen to have evolved into a scientifically and rationally based process of medical knowledge from the 5th, 4th century BC onwards. Scientific observations and the development of theoretical thinking, the questioning of the known, and the debates about its demystified diseases and epidemics. These insights and experiences were reflected in the religious teachings of the two great Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam, which dominated the Mediterranean and the Near Eastern cultural regions. In these multi-ethnic and multi-religious areas, the classical teachings of Greek and Roman antiquity influenced the healing and the care of the sick. Health disorders were attributed to natural causes. The conclusion. The idea of illness as divine punishment, which originated in the ancient Near Eastern cultures and was disseminated in the Hebrew Bible, had been overcome in the Holy Scriptures of Christianity and Islam by the end of late antiquity in the 5th, 6th century and the beginning of the Arab expansion in 17th century. That means illness is not a divine punishment, it is nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent lecture. Also, the first one. Unfortunately, I told before that I will have to leave, but I'd like to take part in discussion. And I know that our President Klaus often has a question that combines the two lectures. So maybe, Klaus, can you comment something about that? Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And to Violeta to continue.
A question, because I have to leave. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we do.
Because I have to leave a little bit earlier in order to get the train back to Munich here from Salzburg. And it was absolutely fascinating for me this evening, because as I already mentioned in my introduction, I see a connection between both talks. Let me formulate it in a first question to the first speaker. It is amazing to see these mathematical ratios and in connection with musical theory. And it is for me, as a mathematician, fascinating to see how these classical expression of the ratios are in modern mathematical terms expressed, for example, logarithmic expression, or the irrational ratios and what we call nowadays the irrational numbers. Now, my point is the following. In the Greek time, even before Euclid, but in the 5th book of Euclid's Elements, it was made precise by Hippasus of Metapont, namely Greek theory of proportions. And proportions means relations, proportions of quantities that may be numbers, that may be tones, that may be geometrical quantities. And the amazing point from a modern point of view is that this Greek theory, which is expressed in the 5th book of Euclid's Element, is mathematically, in a precise sense, equivalent to our modern theory of real numbers with the irrational numbers and the rational numbers. And perhaps you know, it was in the time of Pythagoras and Euclid, the mathematicians were horrified to detect that there are not only rational relations and proportions in the world, but also irrational relations. And that has to do, Professor Tavernier mentions that with the time of Aristotle and Plato, namely the idea of the Greek logos. And logos, the Greek term logos, originally is a technical term. It means exactly this kind of relationship of quantities. And now to detect there are rational and there are irrational ratios, that was for the early mathematician a kind of crisis in the rational belief in the logos, philosophically speaking. And so my question to the first speaker is, the mathematicians were well aware of these distinction, which I underlined here. And what about the musicians in that time? Were they also aware of this dramatic, in the mathematical sense in that time, and the dramatic distinction between a rational and an irrational world? And on the other side, my question to the second speaker is, you also mentioned the time of Aristotle and Plato, and then you argued that the natural philosophers in that time, they want to have rational explanations for diseases. And well, are there, now that's my question to you, are there also aware that there is, so to say, a breaking of the belief in the logos, namely that are also irrational explanations for diseases? That is a question to the second speaker concerning the interpretation of people like Aristotle and Plato with their belief in the logos of the whole world. Thank you.
You want to know an answer, right?
Yes, from both speakers.
Okay, the natural philosophy starts in the 5th century, Heraclit, etc. And their origins are to observe the nature. Yes, they observe the landscape, very easy, very primitive. They observe the landscape and they see the changing of the rivers in autumn and when it's raining, or in summer. So, and they said there's a system, there's something behind, yeah. And so they begin to observe the nature and to ask all the to the elements, yeah, and to look for a system. But logos, I think, logos is not irrational. Huh? Logos is the other side. Logos is the rational end. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
logos means the complete understanding. So, and if they can observe something who could then not understand, they will try to find it. That's science.
Now, my point was that the Greek concept of logos, later on, of course, it has a huge tradition, so to say, in the whole philosophy. But actually, going to the roots of this term, it was a technical term to consider these relations. And then people were horrified to prove it, and that is typically Greek, to prove it exactly with modern serious measures of mathematics, to prove that there are, so to say, the logos in the narrow sense of rational relation is broken by the existence of irrational relations. And so the question is, was that aware to the musicians on the one side? And you explained us, of course, and that is well known in philosophy, it has an important role. And so the question is, was that also aware with the physicians, so to say, in that time, that there are this kind of irrational events? Perhaps the answer of the first speaker concerning music.
Okay, with pleasure. Yeah, actually, there were strong movement in the first century, or between the Greek start. I mean, I'm talking about the 8th century BC and the 8th century also AC. This movement, actually, I can also connect it to religion, Abrahamic religion, because also I did a study about that. And we find a strong connection between irrational and rational music and tunings and what kind of music. For example, Christians, first of all, didn't accept the Persian maqam because many of these maqam, and not all, I mean, there were 7 maqams, they accepted, and they are now the Gregorian music, which were Gregorian music before, with the Johann the Damascene. Also, he was one of the theorists. So accepting a certain kind of tuning system also was problematic. For example, if I go back now to how the music developed in that area, I will say that perhaps Babylonia, Egypt, Greek, Roman, yeah, exactly. And during that, also Persian did influence the music, even before the Greek. And then during the Roman time, the beginning of the Byzantine time, the people in the Middle East tried to adapt the Persian version, which were from Babylonian first. And they adapted again, but they didn't accept all music because they thought that it's divine. There's something divine music and also daily music. I don't know how to, I forgot the name, the word, which has nothing to do with religion. So they didn't accept it. There were 12 maqams and they accepted just 7 of these 12. So the feeling of the maqam and the music were very much directed to life. To say, I accept, for example, in music in India, we say, for example, like raga, this kind of raga, it's for daily time, not for night. And this music is just for night, not for evening. So dividing the music and also tuning systems made also life classified in different way. If it's divine music or not, if the music suitable for certain music therapy. Because of that, I think this relationship between Middle East and Greek and Persia was always like taking and giving, and also India. And the philosophy, we can't divide it. We can't say we start now from Greek and we ignore what's before. So rational and irrational started before the Greek, or even, I don't know if I'm correct, if I just give it to the Sumerian back. Even for religion, many stories in religion, now we are talking about religion, many stories came from, for example, like Gilgamesh and other stories from the flood, which for us it's Noah who started the flood, but of course in old Sumerian stories it's also before. And the music, it's the same. So it's like heriting the music from generation to another. And when a nation start to be weak, so start to take from other nation, and like that. I hope it's I make it clear.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you also very much. If there is somebody who would also like to make a comment, to ask something, myself, I would like to mention that the special research RAMI did has to do with the necessity for him to create new makam in order to find the space for his music vision. So that's why I would like Rami again ask, because as we know, there are hundreds of makams. At the beginning of the 20th century in Berlin, they succeeded in deciding to reduce the number of makams. So the action of Rami is contrary to this necessity of reducing makams. So he's creating makams. Please, Rami, can you explain this shortly? And maybe we could ask Graham Waterhouse to comment also about your creation together. Graham Waterhouse is cellist and composer, and he interpreted your music. Please, Rami.
Yeah, actually, I am honored also to be for my music to be played by Graham. He's a wonderful musician and person also. And of course, for my music, it needs a little bit of patience. And what's good, he's a very patient person, because microtonality, it's not that easy to play it. It's not like the normal music that you put and C, you know where is it, and C sharp, you know where is it exactly. So in this case, we are talking about 6 tones between C and Cs. So it's not that easy. About microtonality and the necessity of having multiple microtonal system, it's really very important. It's like the character of even a person. For example, when I had students, composers, I asked them to compose their tuning system, not music. I'm talking about tuning system. Give an idea for a tuning system can represent you, which can be near to the heart or a situation or certain case. For example, I was always interested also in the action of microtonal music in music therapy. When we are talking about we as people, and we have, for example, like a special resonance for our body. For example, certain people will have more resonance in with certain vibration than other people, and they will be affected more other people with certain tones. So perhaps in the future, microtonality will be used strongly in music therapy. Also, the different microtones gives the character of the region. For example, now I'm doing a research about music in Oman, in Muscat. They are using certain maqams, which is very similar to the one in Damascus, but it's different. I mean, you write it the same, you call it the same, but it's different in microtonality. It's different from the one in Egypt. It's the same name. I repeat it, the same name. If you play it in front of an Egyptian musician, he would tell you, yeah, it's the same maqam, but you make the D a little bit higher. Why? So this is the importance of making many colors to be used in a painting. So it's the same important of using different colors. So you can make a paint with just 2 colors, but you can also make a paint with thousands of colors.
Thank you, Rami. May I ask now, Graham?
Great. I hope I'm going to be heard. Very interesting to listen. And I was wondering about the immense possibilities for microtonality in expanding harmonic expression in music. We were talking quite a lot about melodic expression, but I was just thinking of the Bartók solo sonata, where there's a passage where the minor third goes through increments to the major third and back to the minor third. And the sort of emotional response to the minor third and to the major third is what we're of course used to, but there's an immense world of expression between those two semitones. Indeed, something that Rami was fascinatingly exploring in the cello piece, which I tried with a lamentable lack of patience to learn. I was just wondering, Rami said at the beginning of his fascinating talk that microtonality was more melodically inclined rather than harmonically inclined, and whether he could perhaps expand on how microtonality could be used to challenge or indeed to expand the wealth of harmonic language that one is used to in the normal tonal system.
Thank you very much. You just spoke about very important thing, and Rami found the solution to look for a possible imaginary bridge between between microtonality and overtone spectrum. And we remember that the big war between Platon and Archytas had to do with this, because Platon didn't like the idea of Archytas to use other intonation system than the one who Platon said that is the right one. So Archytas took in consideration the overtones and also the music of the traditional music of that time. And Platon was against this. And he said, no, we have to remain to the universe of our sounds and using the intonation systems of high scientific level. So in fact, what Rami is finding is this correspondence between a logical way to put to find the intonation system and the natural opening of the overtones. But on the other hand, Rami also speaks about the narrative dimension of a microtonal melodical space. And this is very interesting, and I would like to have the opportunity to listen also to his opera, where is in fact he is exploring the narrative dimension of the microtonal meeting overtone spaces. But I would say it's not the first time in our two lectures to find correspondences, because Rami speaks about possibility of using microtonality in medicine. So it's in fact corresponds to what Mr. Tavernier spoke about. So could we ask you to get in contact yourself? So what do you think, Mr. Tavernier? It is possible to speak about the possibility of helping people with music? Oh, Mr. Tavernier, maybe it has a problem.
Yes, you can hear me now? Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
we hear you now. Yeah.
I can give you not a serious answer if music is helping sick people. Yeah, I think so, but I can give you a serious answer.
Yeah, because you spoke about diseases who are just.
I know that art, visual arts, is helping to sick people. That's what I know. That's right.
Okay. Is it possible that you are just getting in contact with, for example, with Rami in order to see? Because Rami, in an intuition way, speak about this because he, as I remember, he also worked with sick people. I mean, people with problems, and he tried to help them. So anyway, I would be very happy if you could get in contact. So, do we have also other commentary? May I ask you if there is
someone too? Yeah.
There is somebody who would like to say something? I'm not sure.
Yes, look at the hands,
Yeah, I look, but I do not see. So anyway.
I can see Mr. Kaufmann.
Oh, it's wonderful. Mr. Christian.
Yeah, hello.
Okay,
I have two comments or thanks to Rami. First, thanks for this short view to the time when the Jewish and Christian tradition was confronted with other traditions from other cultures. You mentioned the Persian Makams. This seems very fascinating for me. And it seems fascinating that music reflects this. So if I had the time, I would immediately begin to read, for example, whether Gregorian choral music also reflects influences from Markham systems or things like that. Because in Gregorian music, we have the idea that modes like Dorian or Phrygian or something like this is not only an election of tones, but it's also a feeling, it's also melodies which give us this feeling, simply said, and this is very interesting. So thank you for this idea of this. The second one, thank you for the idea or the remembrance that microtonal music can help to get healthy, can be used in therapist contexts. And I think we have to see a connection to the idea of divine order, of being, of living according to a divine order, of according to an essential idea of life. And we have to separate this question from the question of the origin of disease. The origin of disease is nature, but disease means being divided from this essential means of life, and music can help to give this essential means of life back to ill people, I think. And this is also a very fascinating field, and thank you for these ideas.
Thank you very much. So I would dare to ask Ivar Fromberg, he's a composer. What do you may I ask you, may I invite you to say something about?
Yes, I would like Rami. About the question about the vertical and horizontal things in microtonal music. Then I will like to pay attention to the Georgian traditional music, which is where the verticals are pure and the lines of the individual voices, there are 3 or 4 voices, and they are irrational. So they don't notate the music because they just learn the music from their ancestors, but they also learn these very awkward intervals. So the voice leading is very rich in intervals, whereas the harmony is totally pure. So it's a very interesting music theory, and I think that Rami could take advantage in looking into Georgian vocal music, traditional music. And also I will pay attention to the combination of the temperament of the scale,
the
and
connection.
the way to describe it. You can describe it in Xenakis' theory. The Byzantine music has the tetrachord is divided into 30 units, and the combination of adding different numbers, that's not it's microtonal, but it's microtonal in a sort of in the way that the cents are, but they are much finer than the cents in the division, because they divide the ratio of the fourth, a perfect ratio of the fourth, into 30 distinct steps, equal steps. So and then if I should ask something, I have 2 questions, but I don't know if they're very easy. The first one is maybe not so easy to discuss, but it is. I would like to know what a little bit more about the classification of music into in accordance to these to the microtonality, and also how does it affect aesthetics? That's something we have a technical description, and I don't know it's easy to speak about aesthetics in this sense because it's very rich and very. But I think it would be nice to do so, and to make a question that is easy for Rami. How is your experiences with classical trained musicians?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the questions and the talk. Thank you. Yeah, you are correct. I mean, classical musicians, I mean, apart from Graham, because of that, I always love to work with Graham because he's very patient and he's very kind. Other musicians, I have an interview. I asked a viola player. I told her it was an interview. You find it at the Academy, German Arab Academy. I asked her, "What do you think of microtonal music?" She said, "No, I don't like it." So it's simply like that. She likes something simple, tradition, and like that. So no more microtonal music. About classification, I can go very fast about classification. So we are talking about how can we use this microtone. We can use it in melody, for example. We can use it in vertical also, as well as horizontal. So like, for example, if we are using the rational third and fifth, what kind of feeling do you have? And if we are using the third and 14, for example? Is it the same feeling, or it would be something? I mean, now we are talking about the timbre of the sound, how it would affect a person. And of course, we are not talking about just two tones. We are talking about the instruments overtone. So for example, like a cello playing with piano, what kind of overtones will come from these instruments to be mixed together to present for us a certain kind of harmony. And I'll call it microtonal harmony. Of course, it's also sometimes it's not important what kind of microtone you are using. The most important that you are presenting what the composer wish. For example, I'm wishing a sound of birds. So in this case, perhaps I'm just writing a lines, and you are playing just, for example, these lines as microtones. But for me, not important now. For example, like Xanax is the 30. So he's precise. He would like to listen to the 30 tones in a scale. Or for example, if we are talking about polympheres, we are talking about two scales divided into scale. In this case, it's the wish of the, and here it's very important to see that some composers are working without giving the feeling of the thing. So if I'm talking about mathematics, I am not asking you for the real traditional meaning of these tones. Now you forget about tradition. You are talking just about these tones exactly for contemporary music, for a new kind of feeling which has nothing to do with your heritage. And in this case, the feeling of the tone itself, it has different, it is just a number. It's not anymore Suzanne or Stefan. It is something, it's number. It's something different. But if you are using the traditional one, so in this case, you are using a certain name. I mean, you are giving it a certain character. For the aesthetic here, you will find it in the meaning of how I'm using it. If I'm using it as a mathematical, in a mathematical way, so in this case, I should put, for example, in Sudoku, I asked Graham, of course, it was everything done by computer or by me, myself calculating. At that time, it was not possible to do it. So I calculated by myself and I wrote the notes. And here the feeling it was, I asked Graham, please do as if you are playing the game. How do you play it? Do you playing enthusiastically? Do you feel sometimes depressed? Give me your feeling while you are playing. Now, I am not talking anymore about tradition, about beauty of a melody, about the beauty of contemporary abstract music. Now I'm talking about certain feeling past to or goes to mathematics. Or about play. In this game, I'm playing a game. This game played like that, and I would like this feeling of this play. And the mathematics is just guides to guide the musician to how to play it and how to perform it. Even, for example, I divided to 9 multiplied by 9 also in time. So its duration is 81 seconds. And even the loudness, it would be like from 1 to 9. How loud should it be? And so the musician should have the feeling of the game. Otherwise, he's not playing anything. He's just a computer and doing the piece. You find it at the internet. Graham played it himself, and I find what he did wonderful. Not because he's my friend, but because he's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perhaps just a quick comment. Often playing music, one has to decide between textural accuracy or expression or sort of contact with the instrument. And I remember with learning Rami's piece, the notation was extremely precise. And I got to the stage of purely concentrating on the exactitude of the notation in terms of duration and pitch. But then at a certain point, I seem to remember Rami said, well, don't take too much care about the tiny nuances, but try and play the piece like a complete belonging together piece with it, where the reaction of the player to the instrument also plays a role. And as I remember, Rami was more interested in a sort of a complete musical performance rather than a very accurate Wiedergabe, so to speak, of the precise musical text. And I remember that thinking that was of interest, that even though the piece had been written with such clear mathematical and compositional processes in mind, the ultimate result was leaning more towards convincing musical performance rather than textual accuracy.
Thank you very much. You presented it really very good, Graham. It is just a musical portrait of Rami. Yeah, I see also we have Jeremiah,
Violeta.
Livia. Yeah, Tassos?
Violeta, yes. I would like to ask a question about what we missed tonight completely, views and approaches and in the arts of the Far East. I wonder if any one of the very well knowledgeable members in the audience today in the Western and Asian and Western and traditions, what about China, for example? Are there any comparisons or simple things one can say in terms of harmony and relation to God that we examined, the speaker spoke about for our religion? Anything that you know about the Far East in their religion? Any similarities?
Music? Because I presented something about China. I gave a short, very brief example about music in China. Of course, the notation, for example, has to do with also God, space. I mean, I can read a few of it because I studied in Japan, so also my master.
We have here who you.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you, Rami, for this wonderful presentation. And the part you mentioned and the notation you showed, I know that very well. And I know that you don't read that, but that's actually is not really notation. It's a tablature. It tells you how to play the guqin, which string you pluck, inward or outward, and which position you your left finger press on which position. It's a tablature, but the instrument you mentioned is very interesting, and it's very related to both of these topics. Because guqin is the only, I know that you know just the intonation. You mentioned several times about the tuning system. And that instrument is the only instrument in China, and probably the only melodic instrument in the world using just intonation. And the entire melody is using just intonation, and it can be verifiable. Because of the position, we can calculate that. It's just intonation. And also regarding the microtone music, actually my understanding that there are two different microtones. One is calculated, that is using like a logarithm mathematics to calculate like 12 equal. 12 tone equal temperament. It's artificial. It's not really a natural. but there are some of the microtones are actually natural, like Pythagorean tuning. There is something called comma, 22 cents between the Pythagorean tuning and just intonation. I don't know. That's something maybe we can discuss in the future. I don't know how to address this issue. That 22 cents of comma, we call the Pythagorean comma. And also, it sounds like microtone. Usually, we call the microtonality is an interval between 50 cents. What I'm trying to say that some of the microtone intervals are naturally created. Just like I mentioned, like Pythagorean comma is naturally created, and some are calculated. So also there are some issues. I think this is a very interesting topic. Actually, you mentioned the gamelan and makam, the Indian music. I did some research on gamelan, the slendro and especially the slendro scale. I found that actually it is related to the natural harmonic series, because when you look at the harmonic series, when the higher you go, the interval becomes smaller. But there are regulations. There are some patterns, and that can be a very interesting topic to discuss about how this is related to microtone music composition, and how this is related to the war music scales. What I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of things we still don't know completely about music in Asia, but in East Asia, mostly maybe in China and Japan and in Korea, are mostly using like Pythagorean scales, and guqin is a very special instrument using just intonation, and also the equal temperament. According to music history, some musicologists believe that a Chinese person first discovered a mathematical formula for that, but music itself is really not existed in China until very modern time. Although we found some of the evidence in the pipa, but it's not a completely equal temperament. So what am I trying to say is that the microtone intervals has different qualities and different properties. Some are naturally created, some are calculated from mathematics. But I still think it's a very interesting thing to look at the music therapy aspect. I believe this could be something that we can find can treat some illness, some disease, because the music scales are created according to human beings' hearing nature. So it could be correct some problems in the human, especially mental problems. That's what I want to add it. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. So who you is, yeah, you are a specialist in traditional music of China. Thank you very much. Livia Teodorescu și Ciocana, our composer.
Hello, everybody. Rami, I enjoyed a lot your talk, and it's very, very complex and very well structured, all your thinking. Shortly, I would like you to tell me, how do you relate in harmonicity that you mentioned with microtonality? So we have the sound has harmonic and inharmonic spectrum, yes? And on the other hand, microtonality tonalities, microtones are intervals related, but also they are in the sound, they are like in harmonics frequencies. So how do you relate these? Because you also mentioned timbre. So timbre is very much based on the ratio between harmonicity and inharmonicity inside in the sound, in the components, the frequency components. So shortly, how do you relate inharmonicity with microtonality?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, we go back to a little bit to the rational numbers. So, for example, if we are talking about the overtones, which now even if we talk about Pythagorean or Babylonian, or also I think yet I can say Chinese tuning system, which most of them related also to religion, as I said before, about the beauty also of the sound, related on rationals. That means, for example, if I would like to play the D, the beautiful D is between the 8th and the 9th overtone. So if I have overtones, so between 8 and 9, and so it's 9 on 8ths. This is the beautiful D between. So if I'm playing C and D, it would be a little bit beautiful if I take it a little bit down, I think. If I'm talking about 8 and 11, so I'm talking about quarter tone, about a quarter tone. So in this case, this interval between C and F half sharp, it will be very beautiful. It's not F, yes, and it's not F sharp.
Yes, because it affects the timbre.
Exactly, the timbre of the sound. So in this case, if we manage to have different sounds from different levels together, or for example, we are bringing two instruments. The first instrument is playing C, and the second instrument is playing G. I'm making it a little bit easy. Now, let's talk about the overtones of both instruments. The C have the G inside of it. So overtone of G is inside of the D, the C overtone. You will find it in my theory. It's difficult now to explain it, I think, but you will find it in my theory, because all the overtones of the overtones is having the overtones exist in the overtone of the existent one. So for example, the C, which has also G and E a little bit higher, I think, and then H a little bit higher, and then D. Now the overtones of these tones exist in the fundamental tone of the C.
Of course.
Exactly.
Yes, so harmonicity, so yeah, harmonic spectrum is what is it? It is integral multiples of the fundamental frequencies, but in harmonic spectrum, yes, are the frequencies that are non-integer multiples of the fundamental frequencies. So it's like a displacement for the harmonic spectrum. So it's like a dissonance between the spectrum and it's like, yeah, for us.
Yeah, but if you are playing two tones in the same overtone, so they are not dissonance. They are not dissonance anymore.
Yes, yes.
Anyway, I mean, there are many kinds of how to say it, it's harmony. If we are translating the harmony in correct way, that you are feeling that there's nothing wrong, or you are talking about the timbre of the sound, it's something different also. If we are talking about the beauty, so for example, my piece, Beautiful One -1, you won't feel that I am making the tone minus a little bit, always. It's a little bit minus. With each tone, Graham played something a little bit less, or more, but with a certain interval. You won't feel a dissonance, but if he is playing equal tempered system and suddenly he played this tone, you will feel like something wrong. Well,
I see, yeah.
so the beauty here is how to put tones together. They are dissonance, but to make them consonants, similar simultaneously.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. It's fascinating to talk to you.
This is wonderful to find and to come to the discussion part where it's so important to get together in communication. I would just say that Mr. Tavernier had to go, so to leave us, so that he says hello to us. I'm happy now to invite Jeremias Schwarzer to say something. Jeremias Schwarzer.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I found it very fascinating what RAMI CHAHIN was exploring, because I'm, from a very practical point as a musician, I'm always trying to do projects which combine Eastern and Western traditions. And we had a project lately where we had Mitra Bepuri. She's a guitar player and she's working at the UNESCO chair in Weimar. And we brought her together with a Baroque orchestra. I'm a recorder player. And we did a whole project about hospitality and how we can invite people coming together from different cultures. But then we have this background, practical background, that people have to be trained for years in every culture. And what I found so interesting in your research, that it could be possible to go more on an objectivity level in this practice, because if we would go more precise in the description of things, maybe this approach wouldn't need so much time, and we could have an experience maybe sooner, or we could prepare something in a maybe with some computer generated tuning system where we can adjust just much better and quicker to another culture, which would on the other hand need years, because if you tune a guitar and if you tune a harpsichord and you make them play together, it's always very highly cultivated music. And if you have to train for hours just to play two intervals, and if you have an orchestra and they try it together, so what would you think about this? Could you increase in a way the tempo, or not only the tempo, but what would be the meeting point potential between cultures going on from your research? How could we connect more? Could you explore that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Also, thank you very much. First of all, there are different level of using other cultures' items. So I can say that, okay, let's take a pipa from China and let's use it. I mean, it's okay, but it's not anymore Chinese. We are using just a sound. It's not anymore tradition. I like the pipa sound, and I'm using it as a sound, not as a tradition. If I would like to use it, it's very difficult. I mean, in a traditional way, because I should go to China, I should eat with the people there, I should understand the instrument very well. So I don't advise any composer, me myself, I don't advise myself, although I was in Japan now, to go back to the story, and I played with Now Theater group, Afue, and to be honest, I can also read the Chinese, I mean the character of notation. But even though, I mean, I felt always that I would like to know Japan more to be able to play with them, because each tone has its respect in this case. I'm not just using a sound. Going to a culture and use its items, it means we have very strong and close view of this culture, the meaning of that tuning system. As I told you before, for example, during the first period of Christianity, Afram, I think Afram, the Syriac Afram, he's one of the first who made the Christian music. I mean, who put the basic of Christian music. He didn't use all tuning system from Iran, from Persia, sorry. So he used certain tuning system because he thought this can fit to my culture, to my religion, to my perspective. I'm not going to use other things. And in this case, of course, for example, one of my works, I gathered people from Iran, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Canada. They were playing together. And the idea here, and each one has his own microtonal music. So in this case, it was like I asked them just to be who they are, not to be who am I. And they performed, I think, Professor Dinescu listened to my work and she liked it. She said so, I'm not sure. So it's difficult, but you can reach to a certain point, but not to ask a person, for example, from my point of view, somebody from Iraq to play a Japanese instrument. Otherwise, as I said, it's just sound.
Thank you very much. Livia, would you like to say something more, or you just left the hand? Oh, okay. So we could prolong this. We could still stay, because I have the feeling it's the beginning of a communication. I'm very happy you were with us, and I hope to see you again. You have to come again anyway. And we meet in 2 weeks for the last colloquium in this semester. And then I shall send you also we shall send you the information about the next semester. So see you soon. I wish you all the best. And thank you also again for coming. Bye-bye.
Very much.
Bye.